Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Perfect.dev.
In the studio with us today, we have Alex Feldman. Alex, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Nick.
Yeah, looking really forward. So a little background on everybody. Alex and I, we have been working at GM together for the last 3 years on infotainment. Alex is one of the key people that push through and get our Agile methodology in place. So we wanted to have him on the show today because we think Agile is important, especially as we look to young developers and experienced developers, how we can better intertwine our practices and making sure that we have a good understanding of what it takes to work in an Agile framework. Alex, before we get things kicked off, anything that you want to say to the team before we run through our list of questions we have?
No, I'm great. I think it's quite important and understand what's agility mean. It's really understand what does it mean and how it's impacted the organization. It definitely challenge considering the agility. It's like a buzzword right now, and it's understand that really what does it mean and what it will be involved in how it's impact organization. So it's definitely nice to let people know and share. And I think my experience will be useful in just the way how I get to this environment, to this space. I think it's will be the story I can share.
Wonderful. All right. Well, great. Well, let's get things rolling. So let's start with first question on our list here, which is, tell us a little bit about yourself. Kind of give a background of who you are, what you are, and what you're up to these days.
All right. I have a 15 years experience as a developer. I think this quite interesting in terms of me to understand inside out what's the development, what's engineering, how it's involved, what's the development process. And after 15 years, I kind of shift my focus on more management. I had a small company for 3 years, and this make me kind of move to the really look on organizational structure and see how we can run efficiently, how we can, using the small resources that I have in a small company, actually to deliver the product. Now, at that point, I didn't know anything about agility. I didn't know anything about Scrum or Kanban. And I slowly moved to the kind of, it's the key to keep everything transparent. And when I get the transparency, I get to the involved in the Kanban. And then I moved to the Scrum. It actually get me really buy in all idea of the Scrum and Kanban. Then I moved to AMD as a project manager, and we did initial transformation from multiple team into Scrum. But again, AMD was quite heavily hardware development company, but we have quite some initial success that they continue doing right now. And then 4 years ago, I moved to GM as a project manager at the beginning to really understand it's a huge corporation. There is a lot of process involved. There's a lot of teams, and moved slowly to the change management and actually agile transformation. Just Nick mentioned, we're doing quite interesting job right now, transforming quite a big organization to the agile environment. And here's I am.
That's nice. So one thing, I guess, before we go on to the next question. So you came from both, in a sense, a startup type of mentality and now working for large organizations like AMD and GM. Any particular one that you actually enjoy more or less, or any benefits to the both, or what's your thoughts on that?
It's it's interesting. I think that working in a small company gives you a sense of ownership and the feeling of the product. Even if when I was developer, you develop something, you feel the result, right? But when you own the company, sometimes you don't have a result right away. You need to really work really hard to get something outgoing, to get the feedback from the customer. And I think those combination gives me a lot of motivation right now when you're working on a big company, when there's a lot of activities involved until they actually see the result of your effort. And transformation, it's quite painful in terms of getting to the point when you see the feedback back. And if you don't have motivation, if you don't have actually you really not believe in this, it's really hard. It's really frustration. I think this is what keeping me busy, keeping me involved in finding the right way to convince people, motivate people, engage people. And I think those two, engineering and entrepreneurship background, it's the key.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's really great. Well, thank you for that. And let's go to our next question here, which is, out of all the methodologies out there, right? We talk about waterfall, especially in our organization where a lot of it is waterfall. Why did you choose to focus on Agile as almost like a career path and career practice?
I think if we'll look on history, there is nothing wrong with waterfall. I think it's the key to understand and the key to everyone to accept. Waterfall, it's a great framework when you know the product, when you know what will be delivered, the technology may be not as complex as we have right now. And if we take ourselves like 20, 30 years ago, the technology maybe was complicated at that time, but the information was kind of encapsulated in a team, in a company itself. Usually managers more technically more knowledgeable than anybody else. And this way waterfall, it's more sustainable, was at that time where you kind of develop the plan, you develop the process internally. Now, when you look on what we're having right now, the most of the developers sometimes are even more knowledgeable than anybody of the senior people in a company. And I think it's nothing wrong with this. It's just the information, it's more available to the team. Now, I think it's all the organizational focus right now shift to the different structure where the managers, it's more people who unblock the people, who help them to deliver what they're supposed to deliver. And this way, agility, it's focusing on communication, on interaction, help the people to deliver quality instead of actually managing them. And this way, the waterfall, it's still available, it's still practically good. And it's key, actually, if you look on some of the workshop the agile coaches deliver, if the waterfall it's okay for the company, it's deliver what company needs, don't change. And it's make everyone confused because at some point we think, oh, agility is the only way to go. Right. But it's actually no.
Right.
If waterfall is good, it's quality, you deliver what you're supposed to, what the customer is happy, you don't need to change. But if you really need to sustain in an environment that right now really quick, the technology, the competition, you really need to deliver what customer really need and in good quality. The agility is focusing on delivering quicker, faster, with a good quality.
Wonderful, wonderful. So one question that also comes with that or comes to mind is, do you think that Agile and Agile practices, do you think that those are useful in all types of projects, or do you think there's a certain type of project, for instance, software development, that it's better in versus trying to build a car? So do you think that there's a certain set of projects that fit the Agile mold, or do you think that you could apply Agile to all sorts of different projects?
I want to, before I answer this question, I want to make some small clarification that I think will help us in it, and I think people who listen as well. Agile, it's a mindset. It's not a process. It's not a state. It's not a final destination. It's only it's a mindset that helps us to understand how the actual company needs to operate. It's focused on the individual instead of tools and process. We focus on working software instead of documentation. Question, it doesn't mean that we don't need to write documentation, but the focus is what customer actually will benefit from the working software instead of documentation. So the Agile, it's just a mindset. And I think when we go back to 20, 30 years when waterfall was the main, they focus on the same thing. Just the question is how they deliver this. Instead of delivering whole project at once, we deliver in iteration, what we call sprint in a Scrum. So the Agile is just, again, one of the things that we want to emphasize and put a focus, but the way how we're going to deliver, it really depends on organization. And going back to your question, there is many methodologies and framework that fit Agile mindset. Now, it doesn't mean it's only for the software. It can be also for the marketing. It can be also fit product management. It's practically involved, can be fit in any organization, any type of work. Question it's how, and question how it will take you to really understand what's the processes involved, what's the structure, what's the organization, what's the need, who is the customer.
Yeah, I really liked your approach where you're talking about the mindset, right? And I think in our own personal and professional lives right now, it's getting the mindset of Agile and getting team members to adapt to that mindset. And I think you really hit it on the head there, that when a company or when an organization adopts that particular mindset, they have the skills necessary to be able to work in an Agile type of framework versus, and even work in a waterfall environment with using Agile processes and methodologies, I think.
Sometimes waterfall, it's really great.
Yeah.
And there is some benefit.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, it's good to have a start and a stop, right? It's good to know. It's good to know that we need to launch a vehicle, for instance.
I think just to add to the point, any change, it's painful. Any change, no matter you move from waterfall to Agile, or you change the process in a particular team or department. But what the key to understand, what's the benefit, what's the pros and cons on the current process, why you decided to choose the specific process right now, and what's the benefit of the new one. And the same will apply when you move to Agile. When you're doing Agile transformation, you really understand what's the problem you have right now, what's the benefit you can bring, and why. Because at the end, you can easily change the mind of 2-3 people, but it's much harder to change the mind for the 100 people or 1,000 people.
Yeah,
totally. And this should be full alignment. And it's not only development, it should go across all the levels, management and directors, leadership, because it will involve every single person in our organization.
Yeah, so you make a really good point too when it comes to I apologize. We got a note from from Alex on the YouTube channel here where he says waterfalls are only for fun for surfing, right? So that's a good thing to put in there, Alex. I appreciate you listening in today. I know that you can't be on the call, but with regards to how we go ahead and how we frame up when we're going through sprint planning, do you think do you have a particular mindset or process that you would want to put in place for estimating the amount of work? I know, like in a lot of our organizations or in organizations I've worked in the past, we've used T-shirt samples where it's like, all right, a small is worth 8 hours of work, or a medium's worth 30 or 40. Do you have a particular one that you would rely on as an Agile coach that you would want to give to an organization to say, hey, maybe we work T-shirt sizing to try to get our estimates, or maybe it's Fibonacci? What do you kind of lean towards?
I think you touch the most challenged area in Scrum, and it's estimation. There is no one technique that will be best. Mm-hmm. And I think it will be also depend on the situation and depends on a stage of the project. If you look on a Scrum team planning, like sprint planning, it's probably just a Fibonacci number will be the simplest way to do it. It at least gives more accurate data how you estimate. Now, it will be, if you try to connect those points to the dates or hours, it's right away lead you to the wrong assumption. Mm-hmm. It will influence your decision. Is it 2 hours or 3 hours? The question of estimation, and then you will right away lose the whole point of estimation, relative estimation. It really doesn't matter if it's 2 hours or 3 hours. The question is how big is the task? How big is the story? And at the end, you don't know if it'll take 2 or 3 hours. If a senior engineer will take this task, it will take you 1 day. If the junior engineer will take 5 days, you don't know who will choose the task. So at the end, your assumption of the story points and linking to the date or hours will be completely wrong. So now you need to be as independent as possible. And the key here, again, if we're looking at a Scrum, that cross-functional team, it doesn't matter who chooses the task. The key is if we can deliver this in a sprint. And this is the only goal for the estimation. Now, if you go to the program estimation, if you need to commit to the feature, now feature is quite a big It's a big scope. Now, do you want to estimate any points? What does it mean in points for you? Now, you're absolutely right. The t-shirt side, it will be absolutely probably better. And the question is, it still will be relative. You still can make mistake. The question is, again, if you learn from this mistake, if you make assumption that this is large, and at the end you did this in the 2-3 sprints, you probably make a wrong assumption. As long as you're trying to retrospectively to understand what's went wrong and why you did estimate is large, and learn from this mistake, that's the key. And this is why one of the key for when you transform organization is to get to the learning organization, when you learn from every single decision. The same as a sprint planning. You decide that you deliver 3 stories, and in a retrospective meeting, you analyze if you successfully deliver everything or you failed and why. And if you learn from this, the next sprint will be better.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so key to have that retrospective. And I think it's also key to really have a heartbeat of what your team is and what your team is capable of. Because you're right, if you overplan or overestimate, then you will have a pitfall during that overall iteration. But the good thing is you have an opportunity to bounce back in the following sprint to reallocate, reassign your team, and have a better understanding of what we can achieve in a given time period.
Correct. And this is why the sprint, it's small, 1 to 4 weeks, where you can still remember what you committed, what you deliver, and what's happened.
That's very true. That's very true. So thank you. That's a great insight. I guess a follow-up to everything as we're going through the process of Agile, and what do you see as the biggest hurdles in an organization? So what have you seen working in small and large organizations as the biggest hurdle to getting people on board to accept this mindset?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Bringing 2 actually parts, the large and the small companies. There is multiple steps, actually multiple areas when you transform organization. One, it's a mindset that actually people understand what's the key. If the quality, if the team find the defect, they need to fix it as soon as possible, because this will impact their customer. Now, there is a mindset, there is the practices. For sure, you cannot change an organization, you cannot implement the Scrum if you're not following these practices. Now, it's look like the mindset and the practices will make everything, will make organization transform to the new organization. But the key here is actually the organizational structure. And I think in a small company, the mindset and practices will be sufficient, because the company is small. If it's 2-3 Scrum teams, you practically know each other, you really understand what's going on. Now, if you go to the big organization where there's a multiple team, there's external team, sometimes there is a suppliers. The key here is to have organizational structure. What does it mean organizational structure? Organizational structure, it means everything including the backlog, the transparent backlog, the good estimation, at least consistent estimation, because the feature make goes across multiple Scrum teams. And if we will not keep it transparent and clean, it will be hard for us to even to forecast, even to understand what's going on. If we keep our stories not in the right way, defined not in the right way, not consistent, not in a way how everyone who may be external to the Scrum team will understand, it will definitely make it really harder for organization to move forward. Now, for sure, we need to, and another reason, it's what it includes organizational, it's actually the leadership. It's a key for leadership to also understand, but also for developers in the Scrum to understand the leadership actually committing to the work we are developing. It's also clear for us as the developers to make transparent what the progress. Are we still on track or are we still not? What's the challenges? How they can help us? Because management in the end will help us to unblock us to resolve inter-team dependencies. And this will definitely make a key for us.
Okay. Now, one thing that you said, and I'm going to pop this up on the screen here. So Alex actually had said, when do you know that your backlog's out of control? Do you mainly focus on your burn down to tell you? So how do you go about that as a Scrum Master or Scrum leader, trying to making sure that your team is on track through the project and program? How do you handle that?
So first of all, so Scrum Master or product owner of the team, product owner is the one who working on a backlog, who is break down the stories of features into the stories and provide all information to the team so they can understand and estimate the backlog. Now, it's really important for if every story written in a certain way, usually as a user, I want to do something. And if it's specifically defined a way so everyone who is external to the team can understand this. And if its story kind of shifted from the user story perspective, from the customer perspective to the more engineering task, it's make unclear to everyone to understand. Although I'm not saying you need to be really strict and make it all customer-driven stories.
Yeah,
I think the team should have some flexibility, and in some cases, we're going into really deep technical scope that may require to be a technical story, and I'm okay. But the way the story is defined, it's make it easy to understand to QA, to quality people to understand how to test this. And this is another concept that even if it's technical story, it should be way to test it. And the key, there's another key to all the stories should be completed in a sprint, and all the stories should be testable. If it's not testable in a sprint, you kind of putting the black box in your backlog in a branch. Now it's not testable. You may test it later when other functionality will be available. But now if you find the defect or you find an issue, it will be taken longer for you to fix. So the backlog, it's still under, people need to understand the concept, what's team planning to deliver. And even technical, it should be clear, understand, readable. And I think it's for the external people need to see the value of the backlog. You need to understand what the team is doing, what's the plan, what's the next one, what's the priority, what's the rank. Now, if you're looking on the forecasting, it's really important to the Scrum Master to track the velocity. I know velocity may not be stable. Depends on the defect, depends on the quality, but
probably depends on the team too, right? And understanding maybe you don't have exactly, or you had a team member that joined or a team member that left that's a senior team member, that all of that would affect the velocity, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and this has come in during the retrospective meeting to understand. If you committed to 20 story points, but senior engineer left to vacation because it's planned or unplanned, you understand you may not deliver everything.
Right.
Now, when you plan the next sprint, it's a key. And if we're talking about like vacation, it's a key to people to understand. If you're going to vacation, let people know, because when they commit, they need to understand that you will be away. It's a team commitment, it's team engagement and motivation that will be the key. If we commit and we not deliver, it means something wrong. It's not critical. We can always recover. We can always learn from this. But this is team, and the team usually stay. And this why the Scrum. It's the name of the Scrum comes from the rugby, when the team work together. And if one of them missing, the game will be different. So now, for sure, the velocity is different, and for sure, you cannot compare velocity with one team with another team. Right. And it's one of the mistakes that most organizations foil really badly when you try to see, oh, this team is doing 20 story points, another team is doing 30 story points. There's nothing wrong with this. Different estimations, relative estimation, but it's really key to understand. And when the team actually forecast, they not use the velocity from the last sprint. They can see the average velocity, and it's good practice to use the average velocity, although it gives some buffer to the team, but it's still okay. Again, we need to understand, we hardly can plan anything in the next 2-3 weeks. It's more harder for us to plan anything in 2-3 months.
Right.
But as long as we can explain why we used a certain velocity, this will be still good forecasting to the program management to the company to understand when we're planning to deliver the feature.
And I guess one thing maybe to look at too is, and you kind of hit on this a little bit, is when we're initially doing this, when we're initially doing the forecasting of what it's going to take to build out a feature and to build out a story, and we look to assign either a t-shirt assignment to that particular, how do we make sure that, in a sense, it sounds like we're almost doing a little bit of waterfall in that process, right? Where we're building out all these stories so far in advance where we think we have, this to be able to be done in a small, but in reality, it's based on what we know today. And we might not get to that because it's in our backlog for 6 months. How do we make sure that we don't have too much of a limited forecast or a true forecast, right? In a sense, I guess we're looking at it like the weather. Today it's saying it's going to rain, but if we wait 2.5 hours, it might be snowing outside. So, how do we make sure we go from a farmer's almanac, which is, done in a year in advance, to making sure that we're here this week and understanding what we have and we can make those commitments that we realistically talk to?
It's a good point. And this why the estimation, specifically relative estimation, should be done consistently.
Mm-hmm.
If we keep the team and it's as it without changes, for sure, some of the reorganization may happen during the year. But if you keep the team as it, I mean, the number of people, the knowledge for sure, they learn a lot, but the people know each other and they can estimate. And the key, they estimate together. Now, if you start moving people around from one team to another team, and the new people will come to the team, they need to adjust the way how they estimate. They need to understand what's and how. They also need to learn the technology and the scope. So it's a key to keep the people who estimate consistent, at least for the long time.
Now, is that somebody like the Scrum Master or the Scrum Lead that's really trying to help facilitate that and do the re-grooming of those stories as either team members fall off or new team members join? And how often does that iteration supposed to occur?
So estimation can be done anytime when new story added to the backlog. Product owner groom backlog every time, when a new scope coming to the team. And as soon as new story is available, Scrum Master can find the best way to, or during the sprint planning, or during the sprint, to get people together, talk about the requirements, to understand the scope, and estimate. It's really based on a workload, based on find the best time for the team to estimate. Maybe sprint planning is the best, just as long as team sits together.
Sure.
Now, if we look on a more project estimation or feature estimation, now we're coming to the different level. And again, if you're talking about the different programs that run in parallel, the estimation for them will be completely separate. You can compare one to another.
Right.
Now, if you're looking on a project that you're going to commit next year and then you're planning next year to the same team, now you probably need to keep the same people who estimated the last year project and estimate the next year project. In this case, at least their understanding of the scope, their knowledge and experience carry over to the next program. And at least they can estimate consistently. They understand and they know how many people will be there. It's also important if the same people were going to deliver next year project as well. So there is a lot of there are a lot of pieces coming together, and you need to understand, if you know there is for the next program for the next year you have less people will be involved, you need to understand that feature will take longer to develop.
Sure.
All the information should be involved, considered, and take it to consideration when you estimate the feature. But again, consistency is the key for the relative estimation.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's consistency. And I think maybe consistency in trying to go through that estimation. Do you think that having a daily stand-up is useful to those teams? Or like you were saying, do you think having the teams just sit together is more effective? I know that from a Scrum standpoint, having a daily stand-up is kind of the go-to methodology I've seen in our organizations, in my past organizations. But do you find those to be a little bit of an overkill, or do you think that that's the right method to really help push those teams through?
So, interesting enough, then I think in a recent Scrum or documentation, it's not called daily stand-up right now. It's called Scrum daily Scrum.
Daily Scrum.
And I think this is one of the reasons why it's really up to the team how they want to run daily Scrum.
Sure.
Now, if the team only 2-3 people, probably it's hard to call them Scrum, but they don't need daily Scrum. Now, it's hard to find the benefit right away. And I observe as well some people doing the daily Scrum, but then say there is no value of this. Now, it's really come to the think how actually the Scrum running. If you look on some of the backlog that I observe, they may be too technical or they're more engineering task. Now, if each engineer will take their own task and it's really independent from another person on their team, there is nothing for them to share. Now, if they're both 2-3 people working on the same user story, they have something in common to share. And when they groom story into a smaller task, they have something to share and they understand what they're delivering.
Sure.
So now, if the team doesn't see the benefit of daily stand-up or those daily Scrum, they need to really to see what they're doing. I think in some cases, it's maybe will take more time. Maybe they need to see the backlog and groom the backlog more in a, not in a too granular. So it's more engineering task instead of user story. In this case, you actually get more engaged across the team. People more care about what other people is doing and more involved in what other people is doing. So in this case, your daily Scrum, it's more actually interaction between a team instead of just, I did this, I'm doing that, and I don't have any challenges for today. It should be more interesting. Like the same as you come to the morning to your office, you say, how are you? How's your family? You actually get people involved in more personal level. This is the same should be done in a Scrum, a daily Scrum, when you actually come into more personal level in terms of what people doing, how they're doing, what experience, what the challenges they have. So other people can help them or maybe share. And again, this is learning experience. If somebody did something that it's really interesting, you can learn from them offline, not during daily Scrum, but you know what they're doing. So, oh, I want to learn this. How you did this?
Yeah. It's almost like a community approach, or going back to the real reason for a Scrum, which is a team, right? It's a rugby team. So it's that community approach and having a sense of ownership across the team and being there for one another. So that's, thank you. All right, we'll just do just a couple more questions, just to kind of wrap things up. We're at about 32 minutes so far in our broadcast, so I want to make sure that we have enough time and try to keep it as close to 30 minutes as possible. The one thing that I had was, what are some of the resources with everything that you've been able to do in your career? What are some of the resources that you can help point teams or intro developers or veteran developers in learning more a little bit about Agile and or program management? What are some of the tools that you've used to help accelerate your career like you've had?
There is a lot of books available for the Scrum and Scale Scrum. I will say that the Scrum basic, it's really simple. It's only 16 pages document, really high level. And this is one of the key that everyone needs to understand. Scrum, it's a framework that it's really light and really flexible. Now, I think the quite interesting experience I had recently, it's Greg Lerman. I went to his workshop, and he's one of the co-founder of a large enterprise Scrum, Scale Scrum framework. I think it's an interesting framework that just talk about how to scale Scrum. In the end, it's curiosity. If you're really interesting, how you can get this team running more smooth, more efficient, you get into Scrum, regular Scrum team. Now, if you want a challenge, the scale Scrum, it's more interesting how you actually organize the multiple Scrum team together, how you want to coordinate multiple Scrum team together. I can provide more details later on with a number of links and maybe books that I think it's really useful, interesting. But just a workshop or the conference, you can find really interesting right now. It's quite interesting that it goes to not the transformation goes not into small organization only, it's going to the big enterprise organization, because at the end we really need to deliver the quality, and we need to deliver quicker, faster, and what the customer needs, not just the car, but we need to deliver the good car. Otherwise we will fail the competition.
Okay, great. Awesome. I appreciate that. And if you have any links that you can drop by to us, we'll happily put them in the show notes and get those in. I guess one last question, then we'll just go right to our perfect picks for the day. So with regards to, I guess the question that I have, as I go into your LinkedIn profile, I see a lot of letters, right? You basically have all the Sesame Street letters, A through Z, on your banner. Myself, I have a PMP as well, working towards getting some scale in as well for certification on my side. What one of those, whether it's less or whether it's scale or being the agile coach or program manager or PMP, what one of those do you think is most valuable in your career right now? And what ones are you continually trying to develop as you go through your life?
Good question.
Yeah.
I don't think I can answer if there's one that's more valuable or not. I think over my career, I found it's like evolution. When I went through PMP first, and then I went to the Scrum Master certification. We're human being, right? So always, and as long as you're not settled on certain level or certain knowledge, you actually start looking around and see how you can do better, right? And this is one of the approach the Scrum using. When retrospective come, you say, how can I do better next sprint? When we did the PMP, it's more traditional waterfall, heavy. PM book was 600 pages. It's brutal. You need to remember everything.
It was brutal.
I'm not sure if you use all the charts and the table after that, but when you move to the Scrum, you move to the Kanban, XP, you actually learn from the different approach. Now, Scrum, it was initial before, you're not going to scale Scrum before you take the foundation, right? So Scrum, it's like foundation. Now, when I joined GM and I was looking for how I can scale, the SAFe came in place that it's actually a scale agile framework. Now, what does it mean? And when you start asking yourself, what does it mean? You're looking for the courses, you're looking for the information, books. And this is why I went to get the SAFe SPC certification. It's a SAFe practitioner certification. Now, SAFe, it's really good, and we can talk about this later next time. But you will find the SAFe and this way, by the way, it's called SAFe. It's a safe organization to use this approach. But if you look deeper in a framework, it's actually taking the same organization, just changing the names, using some of the practices and the mindset, but actually doesn't change the organizations as much. Less, it takes you completely to the different world. And I think when I went to Greg Lerman workshop, 3 days workshop, it was completely turned me upside down. I didn't know what I'm going to do on Monday when I came back to the office, because it's completely I need to do something. I cannot live the same way I did this before.
That's awesome.
Now, there is another item that in my career that I'm trying to do is the coaching. And as soon as you take Scrum Master, it's first of all, it's not just the facilitation, it's actually coaching. And if you come to this world, whatever you came from project management, it's actually coaching the people, helping them, unblock them, motivate them. And this is whole transition that I think it's really interesting, at least in my experience. And this is why I went to the past to get professional agile coaching certification. I'm still working on this. So I will say it's just evolution.
I love it.
I think less it's the most interesting. I think I'm really big fan of this. I don't think at GM we're still using SAFe, and I think it's the right approach at this point. But it's a step for us. Who knows? Will be maybe something new tomorrow.
That's true. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate that, Alex, and
thank you, Nick.
Really appreciate you offering just on the call just a little bit ago to possibly come on again for a second time, and I think maybe even having a greater agile, or I should say SAFe versus less, might not be a bad topic that we can cover. That would be great if we could have you on and have Alex join us on the call as well, and possibly some other peeps. That would be great.
It will be great.
Hey, thank you. All right, so
thank you, Nick.
We're gonna get into just really quick, just perfect picks. One thing I wanted to share with the team this week is I'm a big fan of Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio came up with a book recently in the last year and a half, and I did stumble upon this video, and I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen here. We're gonna add this to the show notes, but it's The Principles for Success by Ray Dalio in 30 minutes, and so anyone that has looked for a little bit of motivation or a little bit of understanding, this book itself is probably a good 600-700 pages, and to be able to distill that key information in just 30 minutes, I think is really great for anyone looking to get ahead in life, or at least get a little bit of a golden nugget here and there. So I wanted to just send that out to the peeps to take a look at and get some feedback, and we'll put that in the show notes. Alex, do you have anything that you would like to share with the folks here, or anything that's motivating you these days that we could drop into the show notes as well?
I share one link with you, I think, on the bottom of the page.
Wonderful.
I think one of the best 15 minutes video of Agile product owners in a nutshell, but it not only covered the product owner role, but it actually covered all the Scrum mindset. And if you go through this, I think you will have a lot of understanding what does it mean, how the organization operates in Agile environment, and it definitely will help to have a starting point in this world.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely put that in the show notes, and I myself will take a look at it, because I'm pretty geeked about getting deeper into SAFe and taking next steps there as well. So I know Alex is listening to the broadcast right now. Alex says, really appreciate your time. Thanks for a lot of the good details. And he does say, you have a really great name. I don't know why he thinks that, but you guys both share that wonderful Alex name. So I know he's with us in spirit here on the web. So Alex, I really appreciate you joining the broadcast. And thank you again for starting this journey with us. So really appreciate it.
Thanks again for watching Perfect.dev. We also host a podcast on Perfect.dev. This feeds out to iTunes, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Overcast.fm, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, and Stitcher. We hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching Perfect.dev.